Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
Walking around the streets of downtown Toronto, there's a certain buzz in the air right now, and it all has to do with the Toronto Blue Jays. Fresh off clinching a franchise record 11-game home winning streak, the Jays are on a high, and we're looking to investigate just how long they can keep the good times rolling. I'm Gurdeep Ahluwalia, and today on The Big Story, I'm talking to 680 News Radio Toronto sports reporter Alex Seixeiro about the current energy surrounding the boys this summer and a look ahead to the rest of the season. Alex, thanks for joining me, pal.
Gurdeep, good to see you. Thanks, man.
All right, so I wake up, I glance at the newspaper or my phone, whatever, the standings, and I see the Jays are in first place this morning, not just in their own division, not just in all of the American League, but they are tied for most wins in all of baseball. Alex, what is going on with the Blue Jays right now that has them winning what feels like almost every night for the last 2 months?
It is really a remarkable turnaround. And I think we really start the story with last year. There were high expectations last year. They tried to get Shohei Ohtani a couple years ago. It didn't work, but the team was good last year. They won 74 games. They finished last place. It was a disaster. Vladdy had a good second half, but Bo Bichette was hurt. George Springer had a bad year. Alejandro Kirk had a bad year. The bullpen was a mess. So heading into 2025, I think the team tried to take some big swings again. They tried for Juan Soto, couldn't get him. They tried for Roki Sasaki, the Japanese pitcher, couldn't get him. But, they signed Anthony Santander. They made a couple of trades. Max Scherzer came aboard. And I think, at least from my perspective, the overwhelming thought was if they can just get into the postseason and try to catch fire, I think that would be almost best case scenario. Not only are they leading the American League heading into the weekend, Gurdeep, they're a half game back of the best record in baseball, which is currently held by the Milwaukee Brewers. So I know we'll get into it in a little bit. Baseball is a funny sport. You can be bad one year and really good this year. And I think Jays fans across the country are really asking themselves right now, why can't this be our year? And they've really taken their fans on quite the ride this summer.
And look, if you had told most Blue Jays fans, in fact, let's take it a step further. If you had actually told most members of the Toronto Blue Jays, the players, the managers, the staff, the trainers, a couple of months ago that right now in late July, they'd be tied for most wins in all of baseball, I think a very small percentage of them would actually believe that if you gave them truth serum, because the season didn't really start off that well. Is there something you've observed specifically that sort of changed with this team at some point?
Yeah, the first month they were just kind of okay. And there was times where they were struggling to score runs. It felt a little bit like last year. And then something clicked in May, essentially the second week of May. They've been the best team in baseball if you look at the record. They're a really good contact team. They don't strike out. They don't hit a lot of home runs, but they're able to generate a lot of big innings, which was another thing they struggled to do last year. And I think, look, the biggest reason why they're the best team in the American League right now is it doesn't matter what lineup is put out on a nightly basis. If they're facing a right-hander, if they're facing a left-hander, every single one of those players who usually starts or kind of their, bench role type players are all producing. There are nights like Thursday in Detroit where guys like Ernie Clement and Nathan Lucas and Joey Loperfido are all hitting home runs. And they're scoring 11 runs against the best team in the American League Central. And then there are nights like we saw about a week ago where they were winning games with Bo Bichette and Vladdy Jr. and George Springer kind of leading the way. So it feels like on a night-to-night basis, they're finding different ways to win. And that's the key. They make a lot of contact. They're the best defensive team in baseball, which is important. And they don't strike out. So opposing pitchers for the last 3 months or so are really having a hard time against the Jays lineup. And I think we're at a point now where it's not like, is this for real? I think this is for real. We almost hit August. It's how good can the team be? And with the trade deadline coming up, can the Jays and their front office add some pieces to make the team even better?
I'm glad you bring up the point, Alex, about maybe some of the lesser known names really delivering this season. Because, if you ask a casual Blue Jays fan, name one Blue Jay, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is probably the name that they say. And he statistically is not actually having a terrific season. It's a lot of players that maybe the casual Jays fan hadn't even necessarily heard of before this season leading the charge. And maybe there's two schools of thought on this, right? The optimistic take that, hey, look, everyone's stepping up. The big guys are eventually going to get better, and that means everyone will be playing well. Or the other view is, these lesser lights are going to regress to the mean at some point, and this whole thing is going to fall apart. Is it a good thing or a bad thing in terms of sustainability, sort of the way the Jays have gotten here?
Yeah, I think it's really good. And it's like we said, it's every single night, whichever way manager John Schneider kind of puts the roster together, they're getting good at bats 1 through 9. And it's funny because they're leading the American League. They're a half game back of the best record in baseball. And like you said, Vladdy's had a good year, maybe a really good year. But what did we see last year? Among the good things that happened last year in the second half, Vladdy went off and he was essentially one of the best players in baseball. So you start to think, well, if he kind of catches fire like he did last year, on top of the way George Springer has rebounded this year, with the way Alejandro Kirk has rebounded this year, I think Bo Bichette is still the best hitter in baseball with runners in scoring position. If Vladdy catches fire, you really wonder just how much better the Jays can get. So, like we said, it's at a point where coming out of the All-Star break, they played some of the best starting pitchers in baseball. We're talking San Francisco, Logan Webb, Robbie Ray, the former Jay. The Yankees came to Toronto last week. Carlos Rodon, Max Fried, some of the best starters in baseball. And those starters were having absolute fits trying to get everyone in this lineup out. So to me, because everyone has a role, I think that John Schneider's done a really good job making sure everyone knows they're as important as everyone else on the team. It's a lineup that's really finding different ways to, bunt guys forward, steal bases. They don't make a lot of mistakes. I think at this point of the season now, I think the Jays are for real, and it's a question of how good can they get with October really not too far away.
And Alex, I'm glad you mentioned baseball's trade deadline. That's coming up this week, Thursday, July 31st. For the casual fan, the trade deadline is sort of the deadline for buyers and sellers to identify themselves. If you're a good team, theoretically, you buy, you add. If you're not going to make the playoffs, this is the point where you sort of sell off your assets and maybe start thinking about next season. So the Blue Jays clearly seem to be in a position to add some reinforcements to the roster, trying to solidify not only making the playoffs, but hopefully, long and healthy run into the fall. What do you think, Alex, that we should be expecting from the Jays over the next 3 to 4 days?
Well, I think they'll make a couple of deals for sure. And I think at the very top of the list is high-end relief pitching. I think the one thing you see with really good teams in the postseason who make World Series runs, they have a lot of guys who can hit home runs. I know the Jays aren't really kind of constituted like that right now, but they have a lot of high-end relievers that just throw really hard and strike out a lot of guys. The Jays have a few of those pitchers right now. Jeff Hoppins had a really good year. Yariel Rodriguez has had a really good year, but Jimmy Garcia, one of their key signings in the offseason, who they brought back, has some elbow troubles. Sounds like there might be a chance we don't see him again for the rest of the year. So my guess would be they make a couple of deals for high leverage relief arms. I think the issue we always have in the trade deadline is even though we're about 5-6 days away, there's still some teams that are not really sure if they're going to go for a playoff spot or if they're going to perhaps sell. And I think it's teams like Kansas City, Minnesota, Cleveland, all of those teams, they have relievers that I think the Jays could really use. It would cost some prospects. But I think those teams are still in that position where they're not sure if they're going to go for it, stand pat, or sell. So the next few days are going to be really key. I think a starter would make a lot of sense, but Eric Lauer, this left-hander who was in Korea last year, he was signed as a minor league kind of depth player. He's been one of the Jays' best pitchers. He's kind of really solidified things. And we talked about Max Scherzer. He's had some thumb problems, but he's back now and he seems okay. So they seem to be pretty good with their rotation. I think a depth arm would be good. Maybe another bat, considering Anthony Santander has some health questions. He might not be back. But I think at the very top of the list, if they could bring in 2 high-quality relievers, boy, that would make them even a more dangerous team.
And it's hard to believe, Alex, but the current Blue Jays management, I mean, the guys that are going to be making these big decisions ahead of the trade deadline, President Mark Shapiro and General Manager Ross Atkins, they've been here for 9 years now, which kind of blows my mind. And in that time, the Jays have failed to win a single playoff game. How crucial is sustaining this success and having some type of playoff run in terms of the futures for those two gentlemen in particular?
It's huge. I mean, Jays fans have gone through a lot since the 2016 playoff run. There's been no playoff wins since 2017. There's been some playoff appearances and a lot of losses. And I think among the most frustrating parts in those playoff defeats is the big boys haven't really shown up. So I think the nice thing about this team is that, Bo and Vladdy could have an off day, but, Miles Straw, Davis Schneider, Nathan Lucas, like they could have a good game and the Jays could win, even though their big guys aren't playing. So this is not a team that's relying on the heavy hitters every single night to go out and perform. They're just so deep 1 through 9. But for GM Ross Atkins specifically, I think it's crucial that the Jays win at least a playoff series. He's come under fire quite a bit for failed attempts at a lot of high-end free agents that the Jays couldn't get. On the flip side, he brought in Jose Barrios years ago. He brought in Kevin Gausman. And all of these role players we're talking about, he got them, right? He got Miles Straw in a trade a lot of people didn't like in the offseason. He's been integral. Guys like Ernie Clement, Nathan Lucas, Eric Lauer really didn't take much to bring him in, and they've been huge. So I think Ross, has deserves some criticism, but I think he should get some applause as well for how he's built this team. But with as good as we've seen the Jays now, to me, it would be a massive disappointment if they get to the postseason and don't win a series. I'm convinced they're going to get there, whether it's by winning the division or by getting in through a wild card, obviously remains to be seen. Even with as good as they played, one bad stretch over 10 days, Gurdeep, could really change the entire season. So they really have to keep their foot on the gas. But to me, the bare minimum now, with the way the American League looks, the Yankees have issues. The Astros are good, but are they better than the Jays? I'm not sure. The Detroit Tigers are among the best teams in the American League. Jays scored 11 runs against them on Thursday. So, I think that's why Ross is going out there right now and understanding he needs to fortify this team to make them better, because who knows? This could be their year where they make a very deep run in the MLB postseason.
First, I want to zoom in, then I'm going to zoom out here. So on a granular level, Alex, I live, a hop, skip, and a jump from the Rogers Center. So I step outside to walk my dog, and the excitement is palpable. There's something in the air now these last couple of months that just seems to be growing. I see all the Jays jerseys. I see 40,000 people every night filing into the Rogers Center. The Blue Jays, like the Raptors, sort of have this undeniable advantage of being the only Canadian team in the entire sport. So they get not only the Toronto and GTA market behind them, they get coast to coast to coast support. And when you look at what else is going on in the sports landscape in summertime in terms of local teams, look, let's be frank, unless you're a big CFL or MLS fan, the Blue Jays really seem to have center stage and everyone's attention right now, don't they?
Yeah, they really do. It's a good point. So I'll give you an example. Last Sunday, we were in St. Catharines near Niagara Falls, Ontario. My daughter had a soccer tournament, so we were there all day. And a lot of the conversation during the games, before the games, after the games, it's like, hey, Alex, both those Jays, right? I was off on vacation last week, so we went to last Friday's game against San Francisco. It was the first game at Rogers Center after the All-Star break, so I went with the girls and my wife and my mother-in-law. And I think it was the third game I had been to this year. But you could tell walking into the building, there was a bit of a different vibe. And this is the beautiful thing about the Jays. It's kind of what you just said. Baseball, obviously, 162 games. The teams are playing every day. When the team is good, it's awesome because you're, for the most part, getting consistent, good. Wow, did you see that play? The Jays are amazing. Season like last year, it's a lot of losing. It's every day. It's tough. It's a grind. But when you're good, as we've seen, I think the Jays are not just capturing the city of Toronto. They're really capturing the nation. And even when I get into 680 for my shift in any given day, there's about the game last night, right? So they're really finding a way to capture really the hearts of fans across the country because they're not a big home run hitting team. They're winning in a bit of a different way, but they could be down 6 runs early in the game, and you're watching them, Gurdeep, and you're like, I don't think they're out of it. Maybe by a half an hour, they're up by 2 runs. So they've really done a nice job this year, and I think Jays fans, rightfully so, have a lot of reason to be excited about what the rest of 2025 could look like.
Yeah, we're no longer changing the channel in the 6th or 7th inning if they're down by a few runs. They've earned our trust that way. And look, here you and I are on a news podcast talking about the Toronto Blue Jays because at this point they've become so pervasive that they are news, which I love to see. I'm going to lean into the Raptors comparison here a little bit further and finish up on this with you, Alex. We saw what a Raptors championship did to the country in 2019 firsthand, right? More than 1 million people by estimates in the streets, capturing the imagination of the entire country. And it is not hard to imagine, a similar scenario and a similar level of excitement should things continue to play out favorably for the Blue Jays here over the next few months. What do you think a deep run and potentially a World Series would look like in Toronto and across the country? I was 10 when they won the last one, so I can't even really properly evaluate it. How might this compare, do you think, with what we saw in 2019 and the Raptors?
I feel like it would be a supersized kind of Raptors moment. It would be bigger. I don't know how much bigger. It would be bigger. Obviously, the Jays have been around longer, so there's more of a connection with fans across the country being around in 77. I was 8 when they won I remember being on my parents' couch in Mississauga watching the Jays win their 92 World Series in Atlanta, and then of course in 93 here in Toronto. So my memories of the 92-93 are pretty limited. But I've seen YouTube is great for that. So there's a lot of footage of what the city was like, what the country was like. I can only imagine, like 2015 and 2016 were magical years, and they didn't even get to the World Series. But between the Edwin home run against Baltimore, the Jose Bautista home run against Texas in 2015, I've been around a lot of stadiums and ballparks. I've been very fortunate to do a lot of cool things. Being inside Rogers Center when the Blue Jays are good is epic. I mean, 2007, I was there for the Canada-USA World Baseball Classic. That was amazing. I think Canada lost the game, but there's a certain feel you get inside that building that it's hard to describe. I think the best is when you watch back the Jose Bautista home run in 2015 and you hear the roar from Rogers Center. That's what I go to. Right? We're starting to get that. The game I was at last Friday, they won 4-0. There was a significant roar. Like I think Jays fans are starting to realize that this potentially, it's a long way to go, but this potentially could be quite a magical run. So, if the Jays even just get to the World Series, I can't imagine how insane it's going to be from coast to coast to coast.
The hair on my arm actually stood up when you started describing the bat flip. Again, just reliving that. Well, look, Alex, if the Jays continue to do what we hope they're going to do, I think you and I might be having a few more of these chats. So let's hope that's the case over the next couple of months. We really appreciate your time. Thanks for doing this.
All right. Thanks, Gurdeep. Appreciate it.
That was Alex Seixeiro, 680 News Radio, Toronto sports reporter. Thanks again for taking the time to chat today. And I'm Gurdeep Ahluwalia for The Big Story. You can send us your feedback to this episode or any other episode by emailing us at hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca. You can always leave us a voicemail at 416-935-5935. You can find us on the Seeker app or on all your favorite podcast players. Please rate, review, follow, and share. Thanks for listening.